Hey everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about all of the series that I started, completed, or just made progress in the year of 2024. I hope I didn't forget anything. I went through it multiple times to make sure I have everything here. So this should be quite the comprehensive list of all the series. I did one of these videos at the halfway point of the year as well, if you want to go back and watch that for reference, but this is for the total of 2024. So I'm gonna talk about series I started, series I continued in, series I finished, series I read completely, and series I decided to DNF. So let's go through those. First of all, for the series I started, that means I have read at least the first book in the series in 2024. We have the Miss Fisher series, where I read the first book. This is a 1920s mystery series. I do think I will continue on with this one sometime in the future, but I haven't like super fixed plans. This is a book series where I watched the TV show first. I am obsessed with the TV show, so I decided to look what the books are about as well. Next we have the Dark Lord Davy series, where I also read the first book. This is a duology where we follow a woman who is sent to a fantasy land to save the people from the Dark Lord. But she has tried and failed again and again, and she always respawns and has to try again. And so she's done this for 2000 years now. She's over it. So she decides instead to become the Dark Lord. And this is kind of like humorous. The second book will come out next year, I'm pretty sure, so I hope to finish that off next year. Then we have Her Royal Spyness. This is a 1930s mystery series. Again, I do not have like super firm plans to continue on with that, but I had enjoyed the first book that I read, so I think I will continue eventually, but it's not like super high on my list. This one follows a noblewoman who is not very rich in the 1930s, and she, in the first book, is kind of involved in a crime and has to solve it. Then this is my series of shame, because I thought I would read all of that in 2024, but then the year ran out and there were still books left. So we have the Mistborn Era 1 trilogy. I have read the first book. I will read the other two at the beginning of January now to get them out of the way and to finish this first trilogy off, because I have the second era on my list to read in 2025 as well. This is a high fantasy series where we follow our characters who can ingest metals, and that gives them different powers, and they're trying to use these powers to overthrow the Empire. And last but not least, we have the Summoner's Circle. So I read Evocation. I thought it was a standalone, but now there is a sequel announced. I think that will come out this year as well. So I hope to be able to read that as well. I did enjoy Evocation, so I'm not mad about reading more about these characters. I actually grew to like them quite a bit. This is about a poly romance, and it is kind of a magical scenario with like demons and kind of like different kinds of magic, and it's very intriguing. So overall, that means I started 5 series in 2024. Next up, we will talk about series that I have continued. The first one being the Heartstopper series. I read volume 3 this year. I do not own the other volumes, but I told my best friend that maybe she wants to gift them to me at some point, so we'll see. Whenever I get them, I will continue on with that series as well. I love the TV show again. I do like the comics as well, so this is just a very cozy read, and this is about 2 boys falling in love. It has this like high school feel, but this also very supportive friend group, and it's just like a warm hug in a comic. Then we have Sunbringer. I always forget what the series is called, but the first book is Godkiller. So I continued on with that series, and I'm eagerly awaiting the next book. I think this is going to be a trilogy, so I hope to finish it this year. This is a series where we follow a god killer who goes around the world to kill gods, because gods are not allowed anymore, but it gets so much deeper than that. Then we have Cheese Sweet Home, which is a manga series, and I continued by reading volume 8. I usually get one of these from my best friend every year, so it's like really cute. We are getting close to the end. I think there is 12 volumes in general. So yeah, this is just a very cute like children's manga series about a small cat who gets adopted by a family. Then I also continued on reading Monstrous, I think with volume 8 as well. Is that coincidence? We don't know. Monstrous is a comic series that is high fantasy. It has a ton of women and power. The art style is just gorgeous, and it tells the story of Micah Halfwolf, who is kind of stuck in the middle of a war between organics and humans. There is also witches, and it's like very dark, but I love it. I also continued my journey in the Discworld by reading Equal Rights, the third book in publication order, and I already owned more to now. I got it for Christmas, so I will continue on with this series as well. This is again a high fantasy series, but it's very satirical and weirdly funny. And I think if you haven't heard about the Discworld yet, then you probably don't like fantasy very much. Then I also continued on with Legends and Lattes because I read the prequel, Bookships and Bone Dust. I thought that would be it, but then they announced another book, so I guess this is only a continued series. I'm not quite sure when the next book will be out, maybe in 2025, so I can read it this year as well. So this is a cozy fantasy series where we follow a orc called Viv, and she settles down for cozy times in those two books that we have so far. No idea what the third book will be about. And then, very last minute, I also continued on with the Dead Djinn universe that is written by P. Jelly Clark by reading the second short story in the series and making way to finally read the next novella in 2025. This is a steampunk series that is set in a historical Egypt, and I just love it so much. I love the idea so much, so I definitely want to continue on with that. So in total, I continued reading 7 series in 2024. Next up, we will talk about series that I have finished in 2024. And the first one is the Our Violent Delights series. It's a duology. So I read Our Violent Ends, and this is a kind of historical fantasy series. It's set in 1920s in Shanghai when there is a weird sickness that is going around, and it's also inspired by Romeo and Juliet. So we have two kind of fighting crime families, and our two main characters are of these two families, and they're not allowed to be together. There is other series in the same world, but even though I do want to read them, I don't count them in here, so I say it's finished. Next, we have The Undertakers by Nicole Glover. Again, I don't know what the series is called, but this is a duology, but again, there will be more books in the same world, but for other characters, so for now I will count this as finished. This is again a mystery series, but it has a fantasy aspect as well, because there is magic that is based on the constellations, and we have a couple, and they are trying to solve crimes. Then I finally finished the Cole Saga by Noah Gordon. I didn't love the last book. I think the first two books are more historical fiction, and because of that I enjoyed those more. But I'm very happy to have finished this. This is a series that concerns itself with medicine and healing, and just follows different healers at different times in history. And then last but not least, I'm going to count this as finished because I don't think there's more books announced, and that is the Cerulean Chronicles. So I read the sequel to The House in the Cerulean Sea, Somewhere Beyond the Sea. Didn't love that sequel so much, but I count this as finished for now. We'll see whether there will eventually be more books in that world. This is a cozy fantasy series where we follow an orphanage for magical children. So in total, I finished 4 series in 2024. Very fitting. Next up is my favorite category, and that is the series that I read completely in 2024. The first one is a duology, and that is the Letters of Enchantment. So we have Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. I read this very early in the year and did enjoy it. This is historical fantasy that is very much inspired by the First World War, but with gods, and our two main characters are journalists that get sucked into the war, and this has also kind of like an enemies to lovers romance. Next, I read the Southern Reach trilogy. Now, Jeff Vandermeer definitely wanted to punish me by putting out another book in this world this year, which I have not read yet, but I hope I will read it eventually. But I'm counting this as a trilogy because it has been a trilogy literally until this year. So I'm counting it as finished, but I do think I will someday pick up that other book he wrote. This is a sci-fi series where it talks about a very strange area called the Area X, and people don't really know what it is, but they do send in like research teams to find out more about this strange plot of land. Then we have The Winnowing Flame, a trilogy. This one I absolutely loved. I read this for a read-along that was hosted by Cleo on the channel Bemused Bookworm, and I was really happy to have this opportunity to read this series because it has been on my wish list for a long time. In this one we follow a world that gets attacked by an alien species every once in a while, and there is one race of people on this world that can defeat these aliens, but they have been slowly dying out, and so now the question is, if these aliens attack again, who's going to defeat them? This one is also a little bit uncertain, but I count it as finished for now because I don't think a sequel has been announced, and that is the What Moves the Dead duology so far. So there might be more books at some point, but for now I'm counting it as finished. And this is a fantasy series where we follow a non-binary kind of monk person as they have these like kind of horror adventures. Then we have the Radiant Emperor duology, which is one of my favorite series now because it was so good. This is a historical fantasy series where we follow a girl who's destined to be nothing until she takes over the life of her brother and kind of steps into his destiny, which is to achieve greatness. And this is so fantastic. Please, people, read this series. I know this is not a review, but it's so good. Then we have the Lifeship Traders trilogy, which I have read last year, and this is the second trilogy set in the realm of the Elderlings, so I'm counting this as completed, even though I'm going to continue on with the other sub-series in the realm of the Elderlings. But yeah, Lifeship Traders has been read. And last but not least, we have the Crows of Dragon series. This is a 5-book series where we follow a man called Kirin as he is sucked into a big destiny and maybe he'll have to save the world. And I love this series so much as well, and I'm very glad that I managed to read all 5 of those massive books this year. In total, I completely read 7 series in 2024. And lastly, we're going to talk about the series I decided to DNF. With all of these, I have read the first book and decided that I do not want to continue. 2 of these were the least favorite books of my year, so that's very understandable. So first of all, we have the Daisy Dalrymple series. This is also a 1920s mystery series, but it was so offensive and so racist, so I do not want to continue on with this series. Then we have When the Moon Hatched. This is a fantasy romance series that I hated that first book. I really did not like it, and I don't understand why people love it so much. But that's fine, you do you, but I do not want to continue with that. I think the second book comes out in 2025. And last but not least, we have the Lovelight series. This is a romance series. I read Lovelight Farms because it is a Christmas romance and I do enjoy Christmas romances, but I'm not a romance reader in general, and all the other books in this series are not set during Christmas, so I won't read those. So I decided to DNF 3 series in 2024. And that's it, we made it through the video. I hope this was interesting to watch. Definitely let me know how many series you have finished last year. I would love to hear about that, and leave a like if you do. I always appreciate those, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye!